Welcome to Data Forward, the podcast that keeps you ahead in the fast-evolving world of enterprise AI and data management. We bring you expert insights, actionable strategies, and the latest trends to help you stay on top. Ready to shape the future of data? Let's Data Forward.
I'm super excited today because I have Ray Wang on the podcast today. And Ray, if you don't know him, is an industry leader. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research, an amazing guy. Ray and I have known each other for 20 years. Can you believe it? It's been a long, long time. He's also an author. His book that was published 3 years ago, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, apart from being a great 80s Tears for Fears song, has all of the sort of things that we want to talk about today on today's podcast, which is the future of data. Welcome, Ray.
Hey, Ramon, thanks a lot for having me.
Excellent. So, Ray, when you wrote this book 3 years ago, I reread sort of the book, and it was funny because you described your sudden epiphany about how these digital giants were taking over the world because of how they behave, their ecosystems and their platforms. And it's really played out over the last 3 years, even more so than you may have even have imagined. How are you seeing these things today?
Well, that was both a market thesis and an investment thesis. Part of the reason it was put out there is because we thought in a digital world, we were only going to see duopolies emerge. And the top player was probably going to take maybe 50, 60% of the market. The next player might take 25. And then after that, it was just a bunch of folks in the scraps. And that's really happened because these companies really knew how to master data. They really understood how data was going to be a competitive advantage. And they built networks to support that. And those networks were not like 100 million people. They're billions of people that are constantly creating new data, utilizing data, and really building that entire life cycle that allows them to create new products, to identify risks, to handle pricing, to understand logistics. It's all happening, and it's happening at a rate even more quickly. Now, that was the internet age. And we have to remember that was the internet age. And all these derivatives, whether it was IoT or 5G or anything else. But now we've had the demarcation of about a year as we entered the age of AI. And I'm going to be clear, right? I'm going to be controversial intentionally. There was no fourth industrial revolution, World Economic Forum people. It didn't happen, right? It was just vestiges of the digital age. But the AI age is real. And that AI age actually is different. The internet age was decentralized. It was open. It was cheaper. There were a lot of players. This AI age by design, unfortunately, by design, is closed. It's centralized. It's more expensive, and only a few are going to win. And it's going to be up to us to change that, because if we don't democratize the data, we will be lost in the dark ages of the internet for a long time.
Wow, that's really sort of prescient and somewhat scary, but huge opportunities, right, are to be found in this age of data. You talked about, as I mentioned earlier in the book, about data mastery, right? Being able to monetize that data, being able to use it. But it's all about the quality of the data as well, right, Ray? The trust in the data. How are you seeing sort of companies, corporations trying to improve their data quality? It's been a never-ending thing.
Every organization isn't very good at it, right? We know that. And that's just been the history of the way data's worked for a lot of organizations, right? You and I started in the world of master data, or maybe even data warehousing, right? That's way, way back there.
Right.
But the goal of every organization is still the same. How do we access all the information inside organizations? How do we break down functional fiefdoms? How do we take those silos of data and actually do some good with it? And the good news is the technology has advanced that we can actually point to the data, look to the data. We can take any data from any source. It could be in the cloud. It could be on premises. It could sit remotely at the edges. And we can put them into time series. We can actually apply that information and insight to get better context. And that's where we are at the moment. Every organization wants to take their data, untrap it, bring it to life. They want to apply it to a business process so that they can take action on it. And they want to serve up something, whether it's an experience, a physical or digital experience. That's where we are. And the good news is the tools are better. We're working much more quickly to do that. And the companies that have a data strategy are actually winning. Yeah. And let me give you an example. We looked at the Uber earnings from the last quarter, and it was very apparent that the company had a strong data strategy. They can do dynamic pricing. Okay, great. But here's the piece that was interesting. They have optimized ride batching. And ride batching means you can put you can share rides, you can pull people together into the same car. And when you have ride batching working, that means you have optimized supply chains, which means every driver can make more per ride, and you can actually have more trips per driver.
Yeah.
That's a company that gets data strategy.
That's incredible. So the data itself drives the applications and the business, but people are taking this sort of almost ambient data and monetizing it in different ways, right? Sort of mobile telco companies are taking sort of location data and trying to sort of personalize advertising. How do you see that playing out, especially with increased regulatory requirements around what you're allowed to do with personalized data and so on and so forth? How do you see that shaping up?
The ambient experiences that we talk about, which is, the stuff that happens in the background, like a suggestion or a nudge or some context or an experience that just happens naturally, are really built on give-get models, right? You basically are doing A to X testing, right? You react one way, system understands that, hopes to actually provide the same experience in the future based on the context, and continues to build, memory over that based on the number of transactions. We're going to see that level of mass personalization at scale continue to evolve. And I think that's an important piece. But the regulatory piece that you're talking about is a little bit different. I have figured out the bypass to all this regulatory. I'm not worried about cookie apocalypse. I'm not worried about how your data is used. Here's why. On the consumer level, you will give it up. You will give it up every time. You will trade privacy for convenience. You'll trade privacy for value. You'll trade privacy for like a free offer. You'll trade privacy for anything. And I'm going to count on that. Because I'm going to offer you a loyalty program where you're going to sign away all your rights. And that give-get on data means you get benefits, you get better personalization, you actually will have additional levels of value you haven't seen, and most people will probably choose that option. Now, as a privacy freak, I won't, but a lot of people will.
Yes.
And that's where the context comes into place. People are willing to pay for that. And they will pay with data. They'll pay actually money to do that. They'll pay by trading information and insights. And so we actually think the future is going to be a series of data collectors. And let me explain why. And this is coming from the new book, I'll Never Write, that I really need to write. So we get to LLMs and we're 85% accurate. And 85% accurate in CX that's not bad. It's pretty exciting, right?
Yeah.
85% accuracy in supply chain? Oh my God, you can't do that. 85% accuracy means you're losing millions of dollars per minute. 85% accuracy in finance? Someone's going to jail. 85% accuracy in healthcare? That's not happening.
It's not going to happen.
Okay, so we are going to partner for data across industry value chains. Retail, manufacturing, and distribution are going to come together, and they'll show pricing signals. They're going to understand demand. They're going to understand like logistics. They're going to understand weather. They'll put all that together, and they're going to share that information. So the next 10% of data is just as important as the first 85%, and the last 5% is going to be super value as we get to precision decisions. Because if we can't trust the data, we can't trust the AI. If we can't trust the data, we can't trust the decision. And you know what? All this AI talk is a waste of time. This is about decision automation, decision intelligence in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, so sort of we see that because sort of I've evolved from working in master data management now to this concept called data observability, which kind of gives you a lens on how data is flowing through the system, whether it's a high quality or not. But the other thing, Ray, that people often sort of tend to forget about is the cost of producing high quality data, right? It's not a cheap proposition to be able to maintain the quality of this data. How do people think now more about the data supply chain and the cost it takes to manufacture and maintain that data quality?
Well, they're treating it with their life, right? They haven't done that before. They actually were giving it away for free. They didn't even put a value to their data. They didn't even worry about where the data was headed, right? And for a lot of them, they didn't think about why that data had a half-life and why was that going to be important if they had the wrong information and insight there. Exactly. And as we get to higher and higher levels of precision, you're going to need that quality. You're going to need to understand what that lineage is. You're going to understand, how this all comes back to reliable information and insight. And data observability is going to play a big role, right? So is this different than testing? Yes. Is it different than monitoring? Yes. Is it different than quality? It's flat. Yes. Is it different than reliability? Yes. It's a whole brand new field that people are actually jumping into.
Yeah, we're seeing actually that this is the second most requested inquiry in people's minds beyond AI. But let's talk about AI for a second, because would you have ever imagined we'd be here so fast once the ChatGPT was released, and how we'd be talking about sort of responsible AI and sort of all of this? I mean, when you wrote the book, I mean, this hadn't even started yet. If you were to fast forward or look back actually on what you were thinking at the time, is this something that you could have ever have imagined?
We definitely imagine. We thought it was going to happen 5 to 7 years from now,
Yeah.
not now.
Hmm.
And the fact that the advancements were made, but keep in mind, AI has been around for a long time.
Exactly.
Generative AI is what captured everyone's imagination.
Yeah.
Our challenge is different. If you want 1 + 1 to equal 2 99.7% of the time, then do Gen AI.
Yeah.
But I want 1 + 1 to equal 2 all the time,
That's right.
right? And so we have ML and other forms that are there. But the point being is generative AI captured imagination. It's made language very important, and it's really given us the ability to think about multimodal ways to actually, replace AI, make AI the new UX for almost every interface. And that changes, that's a big paradigm there. And then the second paradigm around that is the fact that we're gone from moving to augmentation to acceleration to automation very quickly. And now we're talking about agents.
Yeah.
And in the future, it's going to be more about advisors. And so we are very advanced in what we are expecting of AI. And we are very, very much behind in terms of what we actually deliver. And so this is going to be the gap that everyone's going to be trying to overcome for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, you have the catbird seat. I see you on CNBC, Bloomberg all the time talking about Nvidia's earnings and Tesla, and you're always rubbing shoulders with the likes of Benioff and Satyam, and what do you think? Who's making the strategic moves in your mind, right? And of course, everybody's doing the right things, but the Salesforce have the leg up with Agentforce. Does Microsoft with their Copilot, will that evolve? What's your perspective? I'm sure everybody here who's listening to the podcast is dying to know.
So I'm not as excited about the hardware and the GPU providers because I think that game is pretty much down to about 2 or 3 players.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not excited about what the hyperscalers or cloud vendors are going to do because I think it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
I am excited what's going to happen in software. But what I'm most excited about is companies that are using AI,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uber was one example. Airbus is another one. They've been using some amazing things to take flight information and data to calculate revenue per mile, revenue per kilometer, or cost per kilometer. And that used to be something Boeing would use as their competitive advantage in contract negotiations. What they did was they democratized it and gave it away. Every person who's flying, every plane that's flying is now providing data back into the model and sharing it. And it's a great example of these data collectives that I'm talking about because those data collectives built around industry value chains are going to be important because that's how we share information to get to precision decisions. The second one is actually interesting to me. We had half the world's chief AI officers in one place in New York about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And what was interesting about that conversation is we had the CEO of Sam's Club, which is a Walmart company, come in and tell us they got rid of 100 million tasks. And the next thing you were expecting was not this. And then they hired 3% more workers on the front line so they can improve human engagement.
Wow.
Right? That is where the excitement is, companies that are using AI. And this will probably be the first intro chapter for the book I'm not writing, which is, in the 20s, right? And I know someone might have used this example as well, but in the 20s, there was this thing called artificial refrigeration. And that's great, right? They were going to take over the world, change the future of work, improve cold supply chains, improve health and safety, right? And the winners were Kelvinator and GE and Refrigerator. But the real winner when you look at stock earnings was Coca-Cola. Because they figured out how to use cold supply chains to actually their advantage. And that was the innovation. It wasn't the refrigeration or the refrigerated news or artificial, refrigeration. It was really the fact that someone figured out how to build it into their business model. And that's where the next set of winners are going to be, is organizations that build what we call data inc businesses. And there's 5 types of them, but we'll talk about those in another time.
Yeah, I can't wait. And, really, really excited to think about it. I actually have your first book here, the original, right? Disrupting Digital Businesses. And that was a game changer. And then Everybody Wants to Rule the World was also an amazing read. Just to close off, Ray, I really want to thank you again for coming on the show. It's really a pleasure and an honor. I've known you for many, many years. You're an incredible sort of mind in terms of your businesses that you've started and continuing to share your information with all of us. And I also want to congratulate you. I believe you're running for Cupertino City Council. Congratulations there. Doing good, as usual. Really, really appreciate
that. It's a data-driven approach is all we're going to say.
Oh, okay. Well, you've definitely got my vote and my contribution, and I've just been plugging you on LinkedIn just before we got on here for that. So, Ray, a pleasure. And, we've come full circle. I remember 8 years ago, I was on Disrupt TV when you interviewed me with Val. And now I get to do it with you. And I really hope you'll come on again sometime soon, promoting your new book, perhaps.
Well, hey, thank you very much. And we'll do that again. And thanks for having me. So good luck with the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ray. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Data Forward podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest insider news, be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.